Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. It's our Security Plus study group today. We're about 10 minutes away from getting started. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward if that's something you'd like to do, or just hang out with me here. We'll be starting in about 10 minutes or so with Security Plus, the special Thanksgiving Day edition. Well, Thanksgiving Eve edition. So probably not a lot of people hanging out wanting to do security today, but if you are, we're glad to have you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to let the chat room know we're getting started. Put this right in here. There we go. Click, click. 4. There is also on the YouTube side, there's a link to the chat. There's a live chat, which is what I was just typing into, on professormesser.com/live. You can always go there. All right, let's do a quick check of cameras. Hi, camera. Hi, peoples. We've got this here. I need to put this on this. So a number of viewers showing up. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's put up a presentation and make sure this looks good. Those look good. That looks good. Those are all good. Things are working. So that's promising. Always good. Welcome. Hello, chat room. Hello, everybody. Hi. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving here in the United States. I will be doing this live stream, and then I get to clean. The family's coming over. We're doing Thanksgiving. We're doing the turducken. We've got the green beans. We've got the homemade breads. We've got the gravies. We've got gravies. There's a lot that's going on. So that'll be good. It'll be a good day. So no shooting of video tomorrow, but maybe more shooting of video the day after. This will be a busy weekend because it won't be a lot of people hitting the site. Probably do some website upgrades this weekend. Normal maintenance, updating of things, making sure everything is in the right place. Recordings are going here. Recording is going here. That's good. And of course, recording on the YouTube side as well. I think everything is in place. Do I have what I needed here? Yes. So that's good. We've got a few more minutes before we get started, about 7 minutes before things get going. Got to get those in order. I took the weekend off and went on a short vacation, and now I'm back, and I'm not sure how any of this works anymore. I'm not sure what buttons to push. It's like I have lost my mind in the matter of a weekend. I wrote almost all of November's pop quizzes beforehand, so the entire month was written. I wrote all of the questions we're going to do today, I wrote weeks ago. So I had to go back through them this morning. Like, what did I write exactly? What's in here? So it'll be fun and new for all of us. It's just not really how it's supposed to work. Let's put this over here. In fact, I should probably find all of those. Security Plus study group. What is today? Is this November already? What year is this? That's 2017. That's not what I wanted. This one. Is that 2018? It is, which is us. See, it's all working. Who said it wasn't going to work? It's all working fine. It's like riding a bicycle. You only fall off a few times before you figure out what it is you're doing wrong. So we should expect to have some of that. Wait until next month because we get a week off for the Thanksgiving holiday. We really just ran out of Wednesdays in the month. So next week, normally we do one of these every Wednesday, but next week we don't have one on a Wednesday. So next week will be a bye week. And then we start up in December. I've got the new dates for December posted on the online calendar. Finally, that only took me a month, but we got them in there. And now I've got to think about January already. How did that happen? I'm not even sure where's my calendar. I don't want to bring up my calendar. Let's bring up the calendar here. Calendar. November, December, yeah, January. Already with the January. What's up with that? So we got to get that done. Next week is a busy week for me. So it's all, the holidays. It's all what happens during the holidays. It's always busy. There's always these things you have to get done. Let's get them done before the end of the year. Let's get these things finished. Let's work on that stuff. I have to clean this afternoon. So all of the whole amount of things that are going to happen over the next month are all based around how cleaning goes this afternoon. That's what's in my head. Now, if things get clean, the rest of the year will be great. I'm not sure why that's what's driving me. I'm not sure why that's the barometer of how things will be for the next 30 days, but it is. I'm just shooting video all day, every day these days. I'm either shooting or editing right now because there's this new A+ course I'm working on that will be coming out in January. So there's some things that will be coming out before then, but there's just constant motion, and it's not difficult or challenging. All the real hard work has already been done. The course has already been written, but I'm just shooting, so it's a lot of constant exercise, constant motion. So got to work on that. Hoping to get my a lot of things done before the end of the year. But you never get to do as much as you want to do. But we're going to get that done. That's going to be great. There's already a bunch of videos I already have on YouTube that nobody sees yet. They're already out there. They're posted. I am ready to post them any second. Me and Mrs. Professor Messer are fighting over. Are we really gonna? When should we put these out? The entire questions. The exam will be available in January, but should we put them out earlier? So that's one of those things. All right, chat room, settle in. We got about 2.5 minutes ready to go. We're going to do Security Plus today. Lots of security questions. The Security Q&A study group Rewind is already on Socrative. If you got your Socrative app up, information on how to see all of that is at professormesser.com/live. The live chat is at professormesser.com/live. So you may want to meander over there. I suspect there will be fewer of us today that will be attending this, but there's still enough of us to answer questions and do those kinds of things. Let's see, in fact, how many of us are actually here. Let's find out if it's dramatically down. Oh, we got a good group of people. What was I thinking that nobody would show up? You're all stuck here like I am. Of course you're going to be here. You're not stuck here. This is great. I like doing these. I wouldn't do them if I didn't like doing them. Hey, passed your Network Plus. Congratulations. On to security. Other folks passing A+ in Network Plus. Link to Q&As on professormesser.com/live. There's a link there to professormesser.com/QA, which takes you to the Q&A site. And I go over all of that early on here. You'll find all of those things. If you're watching on the YouTube, it's all at professormesser.com/live. That's where you should be. There's a YouTube link there. So there you go. I guess you're not really stuck here. None of us are stuck here. We can do whatever we'd like. We can do whatever we want. That's one of the advantages of making these things available. Of course, if nobody showed up, well, then clearly I would have to make some decisions. But fortunately, folks are here. That's the real part of this. We're going to keep doing this until you are just tired of me. And then, of course, at that point, I'll have to learn how to make coffee, apparently. I'm not sure how that works. We'll figure it out when we get there. But right now, all of you are here, which I am so happy and grateful for. We're going to have a great time. I got lots of great questions. It's always I always like the Security Plus study group. That's in my wheelhouse. It's the last big job I had working for someone else was all about IT security, next generation firewalls. It's an intriguing career. I always had a good time with that. So let's get started, shall we? Now's good a time as any. Let's click some buttons and let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2018 Security Plus Study Group. I'm James Messer, coming to you live from the Professor Messer Studios here in Tallahassee, Florida. It is the day before Thanksgiving here, and we are so glad you're able to join us. If you are watching this live, we will have live and interactive Q&A during this first hour, and then I'll open up the phone lines if anybody would like to call in with other questions, and I'll take questions from the chat room. All of those chat room questions and all of the links that you'll need, you can always find at professormesser.com/live. If you're watching this in the replay, you really won't be able to do a lot with the live interactive questions, but you can still follow along. So there will be plenty of things for you to go through and watch and see and learn as we go in this first hour. And we're going to focus on Security Plus. This is because I have created this Security Plus course. You can watch every minute of every video of every course I make on my website. All of it is available for you to watch online for free, no registration, no paywalls, no things you have to jump through. You can simply go to my site and watch the videos. It's that simple. Some people like to have an offline version. I make videos, audio files, and my course notes available. If people would like to buy them either as a package or individually, you can find out all about that at professormesser.com/getsecplus, GETSECPLUS, GetSecPlus. That's another nice thing to be able to have available if you're someone who's on the go. You're on a plane, you're in a car, you just like some audio, and it's another great way to support the site as well. Today, we're going to be talking about Security Plus. Be sure to follow what we're doing here at Messer Studios by checking us out on my Twitter feed at professormesser.com/Twitter. The YouTube is the one where all the videos are, of course, professormesser.com/YouTube. Thank you so much for your subscriptions. Subscribing to YouTube is free, and it's amazing how much it helps whenever you subscribe to the site. I know you hear people all the time saying, please subscribe, please subscribe. The reason we beg for those subscriptions is that it goes such a long way with the folks over at YouTube, and we're able to get special access to people there and help for things. And when you have all of these videos, there's thousands of videos on my site, and many of you are watching them. It really does help a lot. So thank you so much for that support as well. If you don't have money to buy anything, that's a way you can help for free, and it does help quite a bit. Thank you so much. Let's talk about also our podcast. There's a video replay of this always available on my website. There's a video replay always available on the YouTube. You can go there and look through the playlist. There's plenty there. There's also audio versions of this available in podcast form. So if you're someone who likes to have your podcasting program, download these automatically so that all you have to do is open up your app and start playing the latest version. This is a way you can do it by going to professormesser.com/podcast. So make sure that you work through that. I think whenever we start going through the details of how do we present and make this available, I want to make it available to everybody however you'd like to get it. So podcasting is another way to do it. All the links are at professormesser.com/podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Security Plus. This is the Security Plus version, the SY0501. This is the latest version of the Security Plus exam. This is one that was released on October the 4th, 2017. So it's been out about a year and change, about a year and a month. This is a single exam you have to take, but it's a tough one. It is one that you might get a maximum of 90 questions. It could be fewer than that. There are a scoring range that doesn't make much sense, but it does to CompTIA, I guess. It's a scale between 100 and 900, and you have to score 750 to pass this exam. We believe each question is worth a different number of points. So you can always try to figure out mathematically the number of questions, but it never quite works out. The best advice I can give you is to just do the best you can whenever you're working through all of these questions and trying to figure out, what do I do next on this exam? We'll talk about some ideas of strategies for taking the exam in just a bit in this series of videos, and maybe in the after show as well if you have questions. The exam itself is multiple choice, primarily multiple choice. The bulk of the exam is multiple choice. But at the beginning of the exam, a lot of people don't realize this, you get a handful of questions that are not multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. It could be a fill in the blank. They could put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. It might be a drag and drop question. There might be matching. You might be putting things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You're never quite sure exactly what they're going to ask, but you have to be prepared for that. And today, I will give you a performance-based question. So you'll get some feel, and you can always go back to the replays of these study groups. The first question of every study group is a performance-based question. And so I'll make sure you go through those and understand those details as well. Today, we're going to do live Q&A. So if you are watching this live here on Wednesday, November the 21st at 12:05 Eastern Standard Time, then you can participate as well by going to professormesser.com/QA. Open up a new browser window, open up your mobile device. There's also apps available. The Socrative Student app is the app that you would like. This is one that will also ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer. Shocking. PROFESSORMESSER, all one word. So that is the way that you will be able to answer questions in real time. I'll get to see the answers. It's all here on the screen. And you will find if you go to that link and everything is working right with your mobile app or everything is working right in your browser, there will be a question waiting for you that says, which of these would be most associated with WPA2 Enterprise? Which of these would be most associated with WPA2 Enterprise? It's a multiple choice question that gives you some options for LDAP, TKIP, WPS, PGP, or triple DES. So those are your 5 options. This is a question from last month. So if you were here last month, this looks familiar. I like to put this rewind question in at the beginning so that we know that everybody is getting in and able to answer the questions by going to professormesser.com/QA. And you can see in real time, I can see as you're answering these as they're coming through. We see those. This is the professormesser.com/QA link. You can visit that and see if you can answer the question about what would be most associated with WPA2 Enterprise. Would it be LDAP, TKIP, WPS, PGP, or triple DES? There's 5 different options there. All 5 of those things are real things. So some of you are looking at those like, what is that? That is a thing. In fact, you should know all 5 of those things and what they do. If you want to have some knowledge about what you need to know for the exam, those are 5 good things you should know for your exam. And as you can see in what we have here, LDAP has taken the lead, a majority. 56% of you say LDAP, 23% of you, almost a quarter of you, though, say TKIP. 15% said WPS, 5% triple DES, and only 1% said PGP. So WPA2 Enterprise is one of those security modes that you would see if you start configuring a router for encryption. And a lot of us are familiar with WPA and WPA2. WPA was the middle ground between WEP and WPA2. These days, WPA2 really should be what everybody is using when they start looking at their wireless devices that they happen to be using. WPA2 Enterprise is a flavor of WPA2 that integrates with some type of name services so that everybody gets at least gets a separate username and a separate password to be able to do all of these things. So that way you don't have a shared password that other people can get their hands on. Everybody would use the normal username and the normal password they would use. And WPA3 is in development for people that are interested in that type of thing. WPA3 is, I don't know if it may have been ratified and not implemented yet, but you'll see WPA3 at some point in the future, probably over this next year. You'll start to see devices start to use WPA3, and WPA3 is going to have some fantastic features associated with it, but like anything else, these things take time to be implemented. It's a new form of encryption. It's going to require additional software coding by the wireless router and wireless access point manufacturers. It may not be able to be used on existing access points, or there may be some access points where you're able to use those things. It just depends on what that particular device can support. And that's where we're going to find out if we have to upgrade our devices by simply installing a new software patch, or we have to do a forklift upgrade, which means we throw out the old one, we bring in a new one, which would not be fantastic. You'll have to decide at that point whether the features of WPA3 are really going to be that useful for you. They may not be. maybe WPA2 is fine with you. Now, since we're talking about name services, the only name service in this list is LDAP. And in fact, A is the correct answer. 59% of you chose LDAP. That is the way to do it. 21% chose TKIP. TKIP is a key method, a keying method for wireless that is not associated with WPA2. It's associated with WPA. So that's one of the ones that you have to think about. Whenever you are looking at all of these different standards, you have to know the difference between WPA and the difference comparatively between WPA and WPA2. WPS is a method of connecting devices to wireless access points or wireless routers without having to know any passwords. You have to know a PIN, and that's not usually the best option either. And it certainly doesn't have anything to do with WPA2 Enterprise. PGP is an encryption method. A series of an encryption suite, really. And triple DES is an encryption mechanism also used in primarily IPsec type tunnels. It can be used in IPsec tunnels, very commonly seen there, but it is not associated with WPA2 Enterprise. WPA2 Enterprise, WPA and wireless encryption protocols in general don't use triple DES. So that gives you some perspective when you start trying to figure out how we're going to do these questions today. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to go through these multiple choice questions and these performance-based questions that I have and figure out the details. In fact, our performance-based question is next. So let's go through and do a performance-based question. This is not a multiple choice question. When you see this pop up in your Socrative front end, it's going to be a fill in the blank. So we'll go through the entire question. I'll give you a feel for what I'm looking for, and you'll be able to fill in the blank. Let's look at this question. The first question of the day, this performance-based question asks, are these hash algorithms, block ciphers, or key stretching libraries? Which are three things you do need to know for the exam. So the first one on our list is PBKDF2. PBKDF2. Is that a hash algorithm, block cipher, or key stretching library? Number two is, we're not done, so don't put your answers in quite yet. Number two is MD5. Is that a hash algorithm, block cipher, or key stretching library? Number three is ECB. Why do I say number four there? I've got a 4 where it says ECB, and I've got a 3 where it says RIPE-MD. But you know what I'm talking about when we say 4 or 3 there. I've got my numbers messed up on there. And then 5 is CTR. And then lastly, 6 is CBC. So you effectively have 6 options here on what you have available. And for all 6 of these, you need to answer which ones are hash algorithms, which ones are block ciphers, and which ones are key stretching libraries. So don't answer in the chat room. That's the most important part. We want to answer online. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can put in those particular options. Let me go through those again for the people that are listening in on the podcast. Number 1 is PBKDF2. Number 2 is MD5. Number 4, which I have out of order, is ECB. Number 3 is RIPE-MD. Number 5 is CTR. And number 6 is CBC. These are all real things. They are. I'm not throwing you a trick question. This is a real thing that's here. So make sure when you go through the list of all of these and trying to figure out what do we do next, how do we do it, what is going on here, make sure you go through this entire list and try to put these in a category. At least you can guess with this one. It's not a fill in the blank. You've got a 33.33% chance of getting it right, even if you don't know. So make sure you go through that list. A number of you are busy Googling. Stop Googling. I can see that you're Googling. I can't see that you're doing it, but I get to see how fast you put in the answers to these questions. I can see in real time as people are putting in their answers. And I can see that when it slows down a bit, I know that it's either a really hard question you're trying to figure out, or perhaps there's a lot of Googling going on. I would recommend you don't. I would recommend you take and consider this as if this was an actual event that you're sitting in your exam chair. Google is not available to you. Third-party access of anything is not available to you. You got to take a guess. So go through that list. PBKDF2, MD5, ECB, RIPE-MD, CTR, and CBC. Are those hash algorithms, block ciphers, or key stretching libraries? Let's find out by going through this list one more time. Let's start with number 1 on our list, the PBKDF2. And if you answered a key stretching library, you're absolutely right. It's the key stretching library password-based key derivation function number 2. That is the PBKDF2. It is not the shifting mechanism used in a Porsche, although it's close. Number 2 is MD5. MD5, that should look familiar. MD5 is one you even see outside the scope of cryptography often. That's a hashing algorithm, Message Digest 5. Number 3 on our list, which is number 4, but it's number 3 on our list, was ECB. ECB is a block cipher. The electronic code book is what ECB stands for, a very common block cipher that you might see. Number 4 on our list, which is labeled number 3, I like that everybody's working with me here, is RIPE-MD. RIPE-MD is a hash algorithm, the Race Integrity Primitives Evaluation Message Digest. Why do we have to make them this difficult? But there's the name and how that works, RIPE-MD. The 5th one on our list, which for some reason I labeled number 5, is CTR. CTR is a block cipher. That's the counter block cipher. So that's one way to go throughout doing all of those. And the last one is CBC. CBC also a block cipher. Cipher block chaining. Block ciphers are a new set of cryptography options, exam objectives that are available in the SY0501. So if you're familiar with the 401 prior to this version of the exam, block ciphers weren't in there. So you have to know all these new cryptography pieces dealing with block ciphers. And if you answered PBKDF2 as a key stretching library, MD5 is a hash, ECB is a block cipher, RIPE-MD is a hash, CTR is a block cipher, and CBC is a block cipher, you did all right. You did there. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to see what you put in at the end of this in the method that I use. But if you go through and you remember what you put in there, there's only 6 of these. I think you'll do pretty good. Have all of those available. I will be providing you at some point during this first hour a way to obtain a webinar-based CEU for this, for those of you asking in the chat room. So listen in or you might miss it. That will be sometime during this first hour. So hopefully that performance-based question was something where you got at least a flavor of the type of things that might be asked of you. Maybe this would have been a matching type scenario on the actual exam, or even a drag and drop. You're dropping them into a spot and you've got a bunch of options available. If I really wanted to make this difficult, I would have asked you hashing algorithms, symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, block cipher, key stretching, and then maybe some of these I wouldn't even put in. I wouldn't even include it as symmetric encryption. So sometimes the exams will do that. They'll give you more answers than you have questions, and you only fill in the ones that are appropriate, some things you wouldn't even use. So be ready for questions like that too. It's not always as straightforward as the one I just gave you. Let's do a multiple choice now. Let's shift gears a bit and look at a multiple choice question. Our next question on the list asks, an organization is implementing a COBIT at all company locations. Which of the following would best describe this implementation? So we've got a number of different options that we're going to look at. This is an organization that's implementing COBIT at all company locations. Which of the following would best describe this implementation? Would it be disclosure of privacy information? Would it be align IT strategies with the organization goals? Would it be standards for financial reporting and accounting? Or would it be security for healthcare records? An organization implementing COBIT. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and put the answer in right there. This is one of those questions from the Security Plus exam that don't seem to be technical questions on the face of it. This seems like more of a policy and procedure question, and you would be right. It is. But just as you get a lot of very, very technical things you need to know when you're in an IT security role, there are also a number of policy situations you will run into in a security role. A lot of the times you're using the policies you create to build the very technical security overlay to the rest of the network and your data. So these are important questions you need to know and important topics you need to know as well. It may come up when you are sitting in a meeting and they're asking you about the security and implementing COBIT. What are we going to do to implement that? How are we going to focus on what we're doing? So make sure you're familiar with COBIT and what it does and how it works. A number of you have answered, so let's see what you have answered. Let's first go to our list of answers and how we did. 59% of you said B, align IT strategies with the organization's goals. 18% said standards for financial reporting and accounting. 13% said disclosure of privacy information. So you've got a few options available on this list, but what is the COBIT? That abbreviation really is the crux of this entire conversation that we're having. And if you are familiar with it, you know that it stands for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies. It's created by the Information, or what is now called the ISACA, what we used to call the Information Systems Audit and Control Association. So if you're talking about compliance, you're talking about trying to align technology with the overall goals of the company, that's COBIT. That's the focus. And in fact, it sounds so easy to say it. Well, of course, you're going to align IT with the goals of everything else. Well, that's one of those things that whenever you run into things that seem obvious, well, it doesn't always work out to be obvious. It doesn't always work out to be anything close to obvious. In fact, there are oftentimes the business and technology sometimes are not quite in sync. And the IT ends up delivering something the business didn't ask for, or vice versa. They happen to miss something. Well, aligning those to the goals of the organization, incredibly important. So if you answered B, align IT strategies with the organization's goals, 63% of you got that one absolutely right. Yes, that is correct. 19% of you, the standards for financial reporting and accounting, that would not be associated with COBIT. Neither would the disclosure of privacy information, to 12% of you, or security for healthcare records. All of those, of course, incredibly important from a security perspective. In some organizations, more important than others. You may be working for a company where healthcare records aren't a big deal, or you may be working for a hospital where healthcare records are incredibly important. So the type of security you will implement will depend on the goals of your organization. Make sure you're familiar with those. If you did answer B, align IT strategies with the organization's goals, you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another multiple choice question. This one a little bit more technical for those of you that are working through Security Plus and wanting to get into the hands-on part. This may help you a little bit. This question is asking about authentication. It says the authentication process for a VPN checks a user's IP address before allowing access. Which factor is this authentication process using? Would it be something you are? Is it somewhere you are? Is it something you are? Is it something you have? Is it something you do, or is it something you know? So those 5 options again are something you are, somewhere you are, something you have, something you do, or something you know. And the authentication process for VPN is checking your user's IP address before it even allows access to the network. What factor is this authentication process using? So this is one where you do have to know all of the different authentication factors, and you may be presented with any number of different options for authentication, and you should know immediately what those options are. There shouldn't even be a question about what those options are. So make sure you're familiar with every possible thing. And in my video, I do go through every one of these and give you some examples of what they are. So if you're trying to get more familiar with authentication factors, that might be a good video to go through. We'll talk about what video that might be in just a moment. I'm going to let a few more people answer on this. These are questions, by the way, that our people in the chat room were mentioning that the questions do have a lot of text on the exam. I try to put a lot of text on these as well. A couple of questions, a couple of sentences worth of content. Some of the questions on the exam go a big paragraph of content, and you have to parse it out. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You have 90 minutes. So if we do the math, that's close to a question a minute if I do my math properly. So make sure that you go through the process and understand the timing as you're going. Make sure you keep that in the back of your mind. The clock's at the top. It's counting down. You can look very quickly. So time management, relatively easy to do if you keep an eye on that. Let's see how we answered with this one. Authentication process for VPN checks a user's IP address before allowing access. Which factor is this authentication process using? And how did we do between something you are, somewhere you are, something you have, something you do, and something you know? 57% of us chose somewhere you are. 25% of us said something you have. 12% of us said something you are. Only 4% said something you know, and only 1% said something you do. So if we go with the majority here, it would be the 58% that chose B, somewhere you are. Well, obviously, somewhere you are means that the system would happen to know where you are, where you actually are. And that's a very good way to set at least some type of factor. And the way that we determine where you are, though, can be done in a lot of different ways. IP address, especially an IP version 4 address, can be a pretty good way to determine where you are. It's not foolproof. For example, I was working with a company based out of the UK. I was in a data center in Miami that they had, and everything that I was using on their network with their internet IP addresses was coming back to me. The geolocation was coming back as the United Kingdom, because all of their IP addresses were registered to their company in the United Kingdom, but they were using their addresses at all of their data centers all over the world. So if I was doing some type of geolocation based on IP address, it would not have shown me in Miami. It would have shown me over in somewhere in the UK, which isn't correct at all. So not a foolproof process. More mobile devices now are looking to GPS. They're looking to finding 802.11 that happen to be qualified. Those types of things are useful. It's not a perfect way because some GPS can be spoofed on these mobile devices. But of course, when you're talking about authentication methods, we know that authentication methods are often combined together to get the best possible thing. In the chat room, people are going, wait, what about a username and password? Well, we aren't even at that point. The question asks you specifically that the authentication process was checking a user's IP address before allowing access. Now, it's checking other things as well. It could be checking 10 other things as well on your system. But this particular question talked about the process it was going through for IP address. So that's another example on these questions. They are a very focused set of content that you have to think about. Don't worry about other authentication methods that could also be asked. Worry about what they're asking you on the screen, which is IP address. What is IP address associated with? Somewhere you are. And indeed, somewhere you are was the right answer for this one. It wouldn't be something you are. Something you are would be something biometric. It would be your fingerprint. It would be an iris print. It would be something that you actually exist as. And your IP address is not part of you, thankfully. Somewhere you are, it was the answer B. Something you have. An IP address isn't something you have either. Something you have with you. Something you've picked up. If you have your mobile phone with you, that's something you have. If you have a pseudo-random generator, one of these dongles you put onto your keychain, that's something you have. So they can ask for a username, a password, and then check for the thing that you have with you. That we hope that obviously somebody trying to hack you from another country isn't going to have the thing with them. It's something you have. Something you do would be something like a signature. A signature check is something that you do. And lastly, something you know. Well, that would be something like a password. We know the password. It's in our brain. It doesn't exist as something we are. It's not somewhere we are. The password is something we know. Private information that only we know. The chair is against the door. The crow flies at midnight. That's something we know. So that's a good example of those different types of authentication factors. If you want to know more, you can always go to my video. I always put the video right at the bottom of each one of these description slides. This is from my SY0501 video, section 4.1, that talks about AAA and authentication. You'll find a lot of different factors in there that you can discuss. There's tons of authentication factors on this exam. There's tons of all kinds of information. The Security Plus exam is a very broad exam that asks for a lot of different things. What I did was I went through every single one of my videos. I got all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the tables that I created, all of the descriptions of how things work, and I put them into a single document. This is my SY0501 Security Plus course notes. These course notes have everything from my videos. It's in there. So if you're someone, I of course recommend you take your own notes from those videos, but maybe you don't have time to go through all of my videos. Maybe you want everything in one place. Maybe you'd like to take all of those graphics and also have those available. Those are my course notes. This is a 94-page document that you can buy right now and download immediately. It's in a PDF digital format. You can find out about this at ProfessorMesser.com/securitycn. Let me give you a little sneak peek. Here are the course notes now. Table of contents. I'm just going to forward through the first few pages so you get an idea. They're sorted by the video. So if you're looking for content, what was in that video, section 4.1, AAA and authentication, you can go directly to that page for in fact, let's do that. 4.1 AAA and authentication. I'll just click on that. Here's 4.1 AAA and authentication, something you do, single sign-on, transitive trust, multi-factor authentication, something you are, something you have, something you know, somewhere you are. It's all in there. So this is something that hopefully doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace hands-on, but it's something you can use before walking into the exam to give you just a little bit more detail in a very concise source. I also have physical versions of this. So for those of you that want an actual book, it's the same content. It's just in book form. In a printed book, a high-quality color book. So all of the graphics and all of the details are all in the color. I know it's hard to see from here. A very blurry view of that. And perfect bound, so like a paperback book. Very nicely done. I have a great group of folks that create that book for me, and they'll ship it directly to you. And if you buy the book, the physical book, you get the digital version to download immediately. So while you're waiting for this to be shipped, you can already start going through the content, put that PDF file on all of your mobile devices, make sure it's available to you wherever you happen to go. And of course, every dollar from this goes back to supporting the site. So a lot of you have said, I want to contribute, but I don't take contributions. I don't take anybody just giving me money for nothing. I want to give you something for your hard-earned dollar. And this is another way to help support the site. Find out more about this, ProfessorMesser.com/securitycn for the Security Plus course notes. And thank you for everyone who's already purchased them and your support of that. It does go a long way to keep everything going. I've got more questions for us. Let's do this question. If I can get things back on my screen on this side. This question is asking that an organization has signed an informal letter of intent with a third-party service provider. Which of these would best describe this letter? An organization has signed an informal letter of intent with a third-party service provider. Which of these would best describe this letter? Is it an SLA? Is it an MOA? Is it an ISA? Is it a BPA? Or is it an MOU? So one of those would be the right answer. Hopefully you're familiar with these informal letters of intent with third-party service providers. Maybe you've done that before. So people asking in the chat room, is the 501 more difficult than the 401? I wouldn't say it's more difficult. I think the difficulty level between the 401 and the 501 is comparable. I don't think it's any more difficult between any of those. But the content's very different. If you look through this, the exam objectives for the 501 exam, 60% of the objectives are new or different than the 401. So if you're studying 401 content, if you got a book that's for the 401, throw it away. Get rid of 401 content. You want it, everything you study for, you want to have, say, 501. If you're looking at SY 0501, you're looking at the right one. So make sure you do that. Don't ever study from materials that don't match the current version. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And that's not something you want to walk into an exam room and be in a disadvantage. You want the best possible chance of passing. That is the best possible chance of passing, to have that. So make sure you do that. Make sure you go through all of those and have all of those pieces there and available. That's one whenever I start going through and trying to figure out all of those different pieces. Maybe you're looking at old content. People say, but I've got the book. No, throw it away. You want to maximize what you're doing. Let's look at the answers we have here and see how we did with this one. I'm going to click the How We Do button, and we're going to see people pop up there, get all of those pieces there. You can see that a number of you answered, 41% of you answered MOU. You have 26% of you answered SLA, 19% answered MOA, 12% answered ISA, and only 1% answered BPA. So agreements are another one of those things you need to be aware of from a security perspective, because there is contractual and security ramifications when you start signing pieces of paper when third parties are involved. It's not something you can take back. It's not something you can change after the fact easily. These are usually locked in stone. So you as a security professional have to know at what point you have to implement certain types of security based on the agreements you have with third parties. These common agreements are important to learn. One of the common agreements, a memorandum of understanding, kind of a casual agreement. It's not a contract, but it does let both sides know what you're working towards. Very often a contract comes later, but at least you can send a memorandum back and forth and saying, this is what we think that we are going to agree on. This is what we think we're working towards, so that both sides know what you're working on. And maybe later on, you work towards what the right answer might be with those. This is one where it sure helps whenever you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do with this particular project we have going on? How are we going to handle this? There's other common agreements too, like an MOA. You saw that one in our list as well, which is a memorandum of agreement. Maybe this is after you've done the understanding. Now let's create what could really be considered a legal document. Maybe it doesn't have the fancy legal jargon that you're used to seeing in a contract. It's not this enormous piece of paper that all the lawyers are going through, but it does have something that we sign. We're promising something to each other, and it certainly helps if somebody has to go to court later. You could say, look, we all agreed to this. In fact, this is the second round of this. It's now a memorandum of agreement. We've all signed it. This is what we agreed to, and it might certainly help your case a little bit. The one we were talking about, though, the question that we had, we back up. This is an informal letter of intent with a third party. It's not something that is a more decisive or more locked-in contractual agreement. And that word informal should be the clue that we were looking on. The informal version of this agreement is a memorandum of understanding, an MOU. So this question not only is asking you if you know what these types of agreements are like, but I also put in this list these acronyms. You have to know what the acronyms are so that you can then apply that towards what these happen to be. This is very common on the exam, where they might ask you a very detailed question and the answers are all acronyms because they just assume you're going to know what those are. This is how we refer to these whenever you're in a security role, you're in an IT role. We don't use the names. Hey, do you send me over the memorandum of understanding that we created last week? No, send me over the MOU and I'll have a look and we'll make sure the lawyers sign off on it and we'll keep things going. And we'll work towards the SLA agreement that we're creating, or we'll work towards the other contracts we have there. We use these all the time whenever we're working through that. So if you did answer MOU, 41% of you chose MOU, a memorandum of understanding. That is the correct answer. We didn't quite get the 50% I was working on. This is pretty close. 41% is a pretty good job. There's other agreements that you need to know about. And as you saw, the agreement types is the SY0501 section 5.1 agreement type. So if you want to go through my agreement types video, that's where you'll find it on the Professor Messer website. That may be a good one to go through as well. If you're at all unsure about these, maybe you're very good with the technical and you're trying to figure out the policy, that's section 5. There's a lot of those policies in there that you need to be aware of. So make sure you are very familiar with all of those. How about a shift now and we do something more technical and from a security perspective? This would be a question that you might be familiar with. This one starts with, a security researcher has discovered 2 different sets of inputs that create identical hashes using the same hashing algorithm. Which of the following describes this characteristic? This is an interesting one that you might run into. A security researcher has discovered 2 different sets of inputs that create identical hashes using the same hashing algorithm. Which of the following describes this characteristic? Is it obfuscation? Is it collision? Is it key stretching? Is it diffusion? Or is it confusion? All 5 of those are real cryptographic definitions of things that you need to know. I know some of them you're thinking, that's not a word. Is that a thing? It is. That's a word and it's a thing. It's both of those. Make sure you're familiar with what those happen to be, because all 5 of those could be asked of you. And if you want to answer yourself, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can go through this list and figure out, maybe you know what this characteristic is and how it works and those things that you'll run into. The security researcher discovered 2 different sets of inputs that create identical hashes using the same hashing algorithm. Which of the following describes this characteristic? Let's see how. We got a lot of people that immediately put answers in. The numbers zoomed up very quickly. So let's see how we did. I want to get a couple more in before we click that button. I think some of you may have known this one. So I'm expecting big numbers from you on this one. I haven't looked. I haven't peeked at the answers yet. I always try to wait. Sometimes I'll look early because I'm also testing myself to see if I made the question hard enough. Let's see how we did. 68% of you said collision. That's interesting. Now it's over 50%, which is, I try to get that 50% number, so I feel like I failed. But is it the right answer? Maybe I didn't fail at all, because 16% of you said obfuscation, 7% said key stretching, and then a tie for 4th, 5% each said diffusion, and 5% said confusion. So this is an extremely important thing to consider when you're talking about creating hashes. A hash function, its goal is to take some type of input. It can be any sized input. It can be a document that is 2 letters that are in a document, or it might be a terabyte of a document of information. Doesn't matter what size. You put that entire piece of information, that input, into the hashing algorithm, and it finally spits out a fixed sized hash. Hash is always going to be a certain size based on what that hashing algorithm is. The real key to a hash, though, is no matter what you put into it, everything you put in that's different should also have a different hash. There should never be a case where you put 2 completely different inputs into a hash algorithm and the hash algorithm spits out the same hash. You never want that to happen. That's called a collision. And that is the answer that we were looking for in this possible question. It happens not a lot. We really put a lot of work into our hashing algorithms, but a very popular version, one that was very well known when this occurred, was with MD5. And in 1996, we found a collision problem with MD5. So if you were going to use MD5 and you wanted to be absolutely sure, there could never be a case where any type of multiple inputs would ever create the same hashing output, then you would probably not use MD5. You may still see MD5, though, used all the time. You may go to a website, you're downloading a Linux distribution, and it has next to it an MD5 hash. That's because MD5 is relatively fast to compute. These downloads can be gigabytes of size, and you can almost on anybody's computer calculate an MD5 hash. And if all you're trying to do is make sure that the file you've downloaded matches the one that's on their website, that's perfectly good use of MD5. You don't have to worry about a collision problem with MD5 there. If you're dealing with something for the federal government, if you're dealing with something that is incredibly important that you want to be sure there would never, ever be a case where someone could ever change something after the fact and create the same hash, you probably wouldn't use MD5 for that. You would use a different hashing algorithm. Here's an example of a collision. So in these 2 sets of input, everything that's in red was changed. So not a lot of this one was changed, only a few things, and they both ended up having the exact same MD5 hash. So that's a real world example. It's not a made up example. That's an actual problem with MD5. That's a cryptographic issue associated with MD5, and those are real inputs that cause this particular output to be identical. You never want to run into a collision like that. And if you answered B, collision, 69% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. Obfuscation is when you make something more difficult to understand. You don't necessarily encrypt it, you don't protect it, but you make it so hard to read through or to understand that it effectively becomes incredibly difficult for the human mind to try to figure out what you're looking at. That would be obfuscation. Key stretching is taking a single, usually a shorter key, and making it longer. Sometimes that involves adding additional content to the key or using algorithms to make the key bigger, or simply putting the key in multiple times to make it bigger. Diffusion and confusion, you'll see those also with hashing and encryption algorithms. All of these are incredibly important to know. So make sure I have an introductory video on cryptography on the very beginning of the cryptography section where I go through confusion and why it's important that you have confusion whenever you're encrypting, so you can't figure out where things came from. Being able to diffuse the content, looking at obfuscation, understanding collision, key stretching, and much more. It's a pretty big video of a lot of different topics, and I throw them at you one after the other. So make sure you become very familiar with all of those. Now, if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I will give you 1 webinar hour of a CEU if you follow these instructions. Make sure you follow these. If you don't follow these instructions, you don't get the CEU. Following the instructions is part of earning the CEU. So this is what's important about this. Go to the top or the bottom of my website at professormesser.com. There's a Contact Us link at the top or bottom. That Contact Us link asks you for your name, your email address, and it asks you to put some information in as well. Make sure you put in there somewhere that this is the November 2018 Security Plus Study Group, and somewhere in that content, put the word collision. That would be a good one to put in there, and I'll know that you must have watched this up to this point, and I can give you an hour's credit of watching this study group. You can also put anything else in there you'd like. I'm the one reading through these. Usually takes me about a week to turn these around to get back to you, so don't be concerned if an hour later you haven't heard anything. I go through these manually. I'm sitting on my computer, and I manually go through each one of these. Make sure I read through your messages. I'm not always able to respond to every single one of them, but I read every single one of them. And I check to make sure you have the words in there and everything's correct. And if there's a problem, sometimes I'll send you a message back saying, well, you put everything in there except the secret code word. So make sure you do that and follow that process. Go to the top or the bottom, click Contact Us, put that information in, put this, and I'll send you back a digitally signed email that says you must have watched this and here's your hour. So that might be a good way to also earn some CEUs if that's the way that you like to use these CEUs. They don't have to be used for CompTIA. They can be used for anything. So that's another way to get something out of the hour that you spend with us today going through these. Another way we're going to get information out of this for the next few minutes anyway is another question. So let's do another multiple choice question. This one a little bigger. We have to know our attack types. Hopefully you've done pretty well with knowing your attack types. This one asks, an attacker posts an entry to a social media site that contains a malicious JavaScript payload. Every user of the social media site receives this payload in their browser. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be man in the middle, privilege escalation, domain hijacking, cross-site scripting, or data injection? Which of those 5? An attacker posts an entry to a social media site that contains a malicious JavaScript payload. Every user of the social media site receives this payload in their browser. What of the following would best describe this attack? Shouldn't it be which of the following would best describe this attack? It probably should. The possible answers are man in the middle, privilege escalation, domain hijacking, cross-site scripting, and data injection. You do have to know all of your different policies. You have to know all the different attack types when you're going through the Security Plus exam, and there's a lot in the exam objectives. If you haven't got the objectives, you better go through and get those objectives. That certainly helps understand at least the things you need to know. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and answer right there. You're here live. You can do it. If you're not watching this live, then you can't do that. You'll go to professormesser.com/QA. Nothing's there. Where is everybody? But you can always come back to the Professor Messer website. There's always a calendar there that says where the next one of these is going to be. So make sure you also follow the calendar and know exactly what's going there as well. That's nice to have that calendar there. I try to update that as well. So you could be watching this video well after November, December 2018. You can always go to the calendar. It's always got the update for you. Let's see how we did with this question, where an attacker is posting an entry to a social media site that contains malicious JavaScript payload. This is an actual attack. This is a real thing that happened. This happened on the MySpace days, but this is something that was an enormous problem to be able to do that. Every user of the social media site receives this payload in their browser. They absolutely did. What of the following would best describe this attack? How do we do? Well, we're a little torn. 57% though, we'll go with the majority, said cross-site scripting. 31% of you said data injection. 9% said domain hijacking. 3% said man in the middle. 0% said privilege escalation. So if somebody is putting something on a site and they're leaving it there, and whoever just shows up to the site gets that payload, then it's some type of cross-site scripting attack. So this is the example that I give in my video is of the bad guy posting a message on social media, adding JavaScript to the message, and now everybody who reads that person's message gets the JavaScript along with it. Now, if this is a social media site that's doing their due diligence, then they are already making sure nobody can put JavaScript into a posting. But that wasn't always the case with MySpace. And one of the first bad cross-site scripting attacks to MySpace was one where someone added this. And what it did was then added them back as a friend, created quite a mess for MySpace to be able to do that because it suddenly snowballed, suddenly became huge, got out of control. The problem with this for a lot of attackers is that it is just a blast. You don't know who's going to be reading the message. So you're just putting it out there and hoping for the best. You're hoping it gets the person you're trying to get, or maybe their objective is not to, is that you don't care who it is. You're just trying to get anybody. And that's one of those things with what they call a persistent cross-site scripting attack. You might also hear this called a stored cross-site scripting attack because the information that's put into that social media posting is persistent. It's always there. It is stored on that server, and very easy at that point. Anybody who visits the site, they're going to download and run that JavaScript, and then they're in trouble. So if you answer D, cross-site scripting, 60% of you got that one absolutely right. Now, data injection, 28% of you chose data injection. That is something that's usually done in real time as conversations are going back and forth. This happens all the time if somebody's proxying information. Information is sent to a proxy. The proxy changes that information in real time. So that is one where absolutely that becomes an issue. So make sure you're familiar with that data injection. 29% of you said that. Whenever you get through all of those pieces, that becomes important to know the nuances between all of those. Make sure you go through those. Domain hijacking. No, nobody's hijacking a domain. Nobody's changing the facebook.com to point to another site. That would not be the issue. Man in the middle requires you really to be in the middle of that conversation. This is somebody posting information and leaving it on a website. They can turn off their computer and go away. They're not in the middle of this conversation at all. And privilege escalation is something that occurs once the attack has been made. Somebody now who was a guest or simple user account now has a higher level privilege on that system. 0% of you chose that one. Nobody knew. Nobody thought even for a second that it was privilege escalation. And you're absolutely right. That is the case as well. So whenever you start dealing with these types of attacks, you'll notice on here, this one is listed under the SY0501. Section 1.2 is all different attacks, tons of different attack types. This video specifically is my video on cross-site scripting. And on a number of these videos, I demonstrate the attack. I use third-party tools to be able to show you an example of somebody using database injection, somebody doing cross-site scripting, somebody performing a man-in-the-middle, and you'll see it happen in real time as I perform those attacks on different systems. Becomes handy to have that. Maybe it will solidify in your mind, here's how this attack actually works, so that as you go through this, you'll know how they work as well. That's going to help you for your exam, certainly. I've got another question for you. Let's do another multiple choice. We got some time left. This multiple choice question asks, A company is concerned that employee social security numbers and other private information could be transmitted from their internet connection. Which of the following would be the best way to filter this information? Would it be DLP, IPS, proxy, SIM, or load balancer? That's one of those where you absolutely need to know all five of these things you need to know. But this particular question is asking that an employee is concerned social security numbers and other private information could be transmitted from their internet connection. Which of the following would be the best way to filter this information? Would it be DLP, IPS, proxy, SIM, or load balancer? This is one where it would be a difficult thing. That's absolutely the case. So in the chat room, JP doesn't like that last question. He says if somebody goes to MySpace or people went to the person's site, not every user who visits Facebook is visiting that user's page and wouldn't be affected by the script. That's true, but that wasn't the question. that wasn't the question at all. This one says every user of that site receives the payload in their browser because this user posted. Maybe they did post it somewhere that every user of that site went to that page. So there you go. Absolutely, that can happen that way. So that is the thing with cross-site scripting people often don't understand, is that if you can get on a page that every person on the site visits, I know when I open Facebook, every user who visits that site gets a certain set of things at the top. If they post something that every person on that site viewed, they would be infected. So that is absolutely potential for this type of problem. Cross-site scripting is a massive issue because of that. Now, it might be that they put it on their own personal page, so everybody who visited the personal page also had that. But when you're looking at these questions that come from the exam, do not pick nits. Do not try to parse out this information. Do not try to say, I'm thinking much broader about this particular question, and the broadness of this question, don't think broadly. They're telling you exactly the scenario that has occurred. I don't think that scenario could occur. It doesn't matter. The scenario occurred. This can absolutely happen on a website. And the example in this question was one of those examples. Because it is improbable doesn't mean that it's impossible. And the exam will certainly present you with questions where things are sometimes improbable, but they do happen. So don't try to read into these questions any farther than they do. And that's something you do have to be careful about on these exams, is they give you a very narrow scope. Every question is a world unto itself. Don't try to match things outside the question. Stay very close to what's being presented to you in the question. These types of cross-site scripting issues happen all the time. And they are problems, when found, could absolutely affect every single person who visits that site. So keep those things in mind as you're going through and understanding the different security and attack types. And when you're looking at the questions, try to focus on the scope of that question and don't go broader. Don't try to read into it. Don't try to interpret what they're saying. There's no interpretation. Look at exactly what they're telling you and focus your answer on that. And in fact, if you look at the answers, that's the only answer it could have been. Even if it wasn't everybody who visited the site, that's still the only answer it could have been. So you're good either way. Even if you did go broader, even if you didn't like the way I worded the question, even if it wasn't everybody who visited the site, there's still only one answer. So that helps too. Let's see about this answer, though, where a company is concerned about social security numbers and how we can fix it. Oh, we didn't get a majority on this one, but we got pretty close. 49% of you said DLP, 26% of you said proxy, 14% said IPS, and 11% said SIM. Nobody said load balancer. Why am I doing this? Why are we going through this, figuring out those pieces? In this case, we're trying to protect very critical information from being sent over the network. Could an IPS do this? Yes, it could. Could a proxy do this? Yes, it could. Could a SIM do this? No, it couldn't. Could a load balancer do it? Absolutely not. So if you did answer SIM, that would not be the right answer. Load balancer, that would not be the right answer. It's got to be A, B, or C. The only one of this that applies here, and again, maybe you don't like the wording of the question, but this is very common on the exam. Which of the following would be the best way to filter this information? That is the key, the best way. to filter this information. Only one of these options is really designed to do exactly this, and that's a DLP, data loss prevention device. This is the device you put on the network. You install as software on different servers. There's many different ways to implement DLP, and very often multiple layers of DLP implemented in many organizations where you're trying to stop information from leaking out that's very private or personal or important. Credit card numbers, social security numbers, medical information, other critical details from your organization. DLP is a very, very broad topic. And it might be a function built into your firewall. It might be a separate appliance that's on your network, or it might also include software that you install on everybody's workstation and on all of your servers. Data loss prevention, very, very common to find these days. And DLP is an incredibly important thing to have because it can protect some organizations from having information like credit card numbers and social security numbers from being sent out over the network. So if you answer DLP, 50% of you, see, we got a majority. DLP absolutely is the right answer on this one. The answer was A. 25% said proxy. A proxy could be a technology that could provide DLP. In fact, it's not unusual for companies to install DLP functionality on a proxy. In fact, it's not unusual to see DLP-like functionality on an intrusion prevention device. But those would not be the devices you put in to specifically provide DLP. It's more of an add-on functionality. And each one of those, both a proxy and IPS, are very often limited in the functionality they have as it relates to DLP. The best option is going to be a device that is built to stop social security numbers. It's built. Its purpose in life is to stop credit card numbers. Its purpose in life is to stop private information from getting out. That's a DLP. That's the best option. Absolutely the best option in this case. That should be your number one option. And 51% of you think that's true. And you did absolutely right with that one. Those 51% of you that answered A, DLP, were spot on. You got that one absolutely right. These questions, everything that's on the exam, everything associated with being able to understand what will be asked of you on the exam is all in the exam objectives. Make sure you're very, very familiar with these objectives. It should have been the first thing you download before you start your studies. It's in every single book that you get. And you should, before you walk into your exam, use this as your checklist. Go through this list and check off all of the things that you know. And if there's something you don't recognize or you think, I don't know that one as well as I should, now you know what to go back and study before walking into that exam. Go to professormesser.com/objectives or just go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. You'll be fine with that. You'll know exactly the way those technologies work with those. I do one of these study groups every month. Can you believe we're through another hour of questions and answers? Next month, the month of December the 19th will be our next Security Plus study group. I've actually got one on December the 5th is A+, December the 12th is Network Plus, December the 19th is Security Plus. You can come back for all of those. If this is after December the 19th or any time, you can always go to the Professor Messer website. There's a link to the calendar. The event calendar and all the live events are listed right in there. You can find the calendar. In fact, it's on the right sidebar of the site as well. So no matter what page you're on, you'll know exactly when the next events are going to be. They are listed there as well. There's links. You can sign up to our notification email list. There's links there. You can also link over to your Google Calendar, and I update a calendar there, so they'll just show up in your Google Calendar. That helps as well. So whenever you start going through all the details of this, that certainly helps. We've got plenty to go through. We've got lots of things that will be happening over the next number of months. Make sure you stay in touch with what we're doing here. Don't forget about my Security Plus course notes. They're available at professormesser.com/securitycn. Of course, the subscriptions on YouTube, the signups and following on Twitter, on Facebook, all of those details are there as well. Make sure you go through all of those. Find the one you like. You can always type in professormesser.com/something. You can type in professormesser.com/Instagram. I'll take you to Instagram. There's a great way to find all of those and know exactly what's going on. Well, that brings us to the end of another hour, but stick around. We will absolutely be able to take all of your questions and anything else you'd like to ask in our second hour. I'll open up the phone lines, and I'll take questions from the chat room too. Thanks for showing up for that first hour and being here. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. All right, everybody. So sorry if some of you are showing up 1 p.m. That time change does mess up a lot of folks. So hopefully we'll be able to get you here next time. And of course, there's always a replay. You can always go through that too. We always start at 12 noon local time on the East Coast. So if you're ever wondering when this is going to be, that's a great way to do it. Make sure you go through all the details, figuring out all the specifics of that. I have a lot of questions in the chat room. We'll back up and go through and figure out the details. Let me first get connected to the phone lines, and we'll have me call in before you can call in. I'm not sure why we do that, but I'm the only one here. That's why we do that. So let's get the phone lines up and running. I've got a few buttons to push on my side as I host my show. I start the show. I figure out what buttons to push. There's my list of buttons to push. And I'll answer some questions from the chat room real quick. And it asks me, thank you for well, you're welcome. I'm so glad I'm calling. Let's turn this off, and I'll type this, and we'll push a pound sign, and I'll turn this back on.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, that sounds redundant, but we'll type it in anyway, and I'll put that in, and we'll see if she says welcome.
Welcome.
See, I love it when that happens. Now I can give you a phone number. You can call in or put questions in the chat room. You can call in toll-free in the continental United States over traditional phone lines. Area code 855-785-7545. It's a free call. We've got also a free way to call in worldwide. If you're anywhere in the world, you can call in on Skype for free. No Skype minutes required. Just put a +1 at the beginning. +1 855-785-RJ45, and you can call in as well. Somebody was asking, is that a cricket ball behind me? What's up with that? Well, it's cricket ball. I don't know what to tell you. I like cricket. A lot of people ask me, why do you have a cricket ball there? Because they like to watch the cricket. Because there's not a lot of cricket in the United States. I get the confusion and having that there. But, that's one of those that does come in handy. There's a cricket bat back there, too. You can kind of see it behind my YouTube. It's right. It's the wrong way. I have to do things backwards. There's the cricket bat. It's not a cricket bat I would use these days because I would fall over. But I do like watching. And, of course, who doesn't like cricket? Of course there's a cricket ball. Because everybody likes cricket, don't they? No, I know. That could be a controversial topic for those. So hopefully that's what you'd run into with the details there. Let's have a look at some of the other questions that have come in. Want to go through this. So if a lot of this came up in the chat room during this session, is that a lot of the things that you have seen for Security Plus go into such details and minutia. Somebody was asking a question about the difference: file encryption, column encryption, full database encryption. These are topics that are not covered in the CompTIA exam objectives. It's a really good example of how you could take all of these topics for Security Plus and you can take it to the nth degree. I'm a perfect example of that. My last full-time position working for someone else was as a systems engineer for next generation firewall company. I spent all of my days knowing everything there was to know about everything I could about that product and the series of products that we had. I would take the idea of IPsec and break it down into bit level communication and understand exactly what the IPsec packets look like, the structure within a frame, understood the configuration settings, how they applied to other products. I mean, I really went into detail. We would spend a full day on IPsec training just to understand the nuances of how you could set up IPsec in the different configurations. You don't need to know that for the Security Plus exam. That's much more detail than you'd ever need to know. So my focus is for you to focus on, my goal is for you to focus on just what's in the exam objectives. Should you know more than what's in the exam objectives? Yeah, you should know a lot more than what's in the exam objectives, and you will know more than what's in the exam objectives. But our focus is to get you to pass the Security Plus exam. That's it. Don't worry about not being able to pass and reading outside the scope of these other things. So don't worry about the details of that. We got calls coming in very quickly in the chat room. Any insight on the future of IT cybersecurity with the progression of AR and VR technology? Not really. I'm not sure how augmented reality and virtual reality have anything to do with anything. That's sort of the idea of, can we create a problem based on this technology that they could solve? That's not the way it works. There needs to be a problem first, and then you solve the problem. Right now, I'm not finding that we're having a problem with security based on those things. There's certainly the normal issues from a security perspective. That's a very broad perspective, but there's nothing associated with that I would run into and having all those things there. Let's go to the calls, though. A number of you have given up on me because I've spent my whole time talking about cricket, but let's go to 561 here in Florida. Hello, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed calling from Miami Lakes.
Welcome back, Ed, in Miami Lakes. How are things there on Miami Lakes and Miami Lakes Drive?
Well, I don't know. Well, I know you like Main Street, but I don't know if you heard recently there was a double homicide there a couple of weeks ago.
Just two. Okay. Well, they're cutting down. There's a smaller number now. That's great news. Good to hear. That's not, of course, not great news. You know, don't like to hear that type of thing happening anywhere. But this is sort of the problem we have sort of pervasively that needs to be solved. Hopefully it's something they're able to find the bad guys and bring them to justice.
Oh, yeah. Apparently it was some kind of a love triangle.
These are the worst kind of situations. We all just need to chill out a little bit, get along. Well, thanks for bringing us up there, Ed. What can we do as far as questions today?
Anyways, I wanted to share with your listeners a security incident that actually happened to me.
Oh.
I received the other day a letter from a company called Newegg. I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Yep, very familiar, and a customer of them as well.
Yes, and a few months ago, I made a purchase from them, and the letter stated that their website was compromised.
Certainly
Apparently, the page that you enter your payment information in had some malicious code embedded in it, and they were able to steal all of the payment information.
Yep.
And so, interesting enough, because even though it's an encrypted HTTPS website, it still doesn't, make sure that, it's not 100% that your payment information is secure, obviously. And so I wanted to share that. And also I wanted to get your opinion, like the last question that you had on today's program was a DLP.
Right.
Now I'm just wondering, could a DLP maybe have solved that issue?
It could have. And in fact, you sort of hit on a couple of questions we talked about. One was cross-site scripting, and that was a perfectly modern example of cross-site scripting and how somebody was able to embed JavaScript onto a page, and every person who visited that page now had JavaScript run in their browser from that posting that was there. And that was a significant issue that happened just a couple months ago. So that's very, very soon, very, very quick to have that there. This is one, by the way, that whenever you're checking out, you mentioned this, is that even though the communication between the Newegg website and your browser was encrypted, had HTTPS, they had all the right encryption mechanisms in place, the bad guys got around it by simply putting the bad code on the Newegg site, and the bad code was encrypted along with everything else. So you always have to think about different layers of approach when it comes to security, and this is a good example of those different layers. Unfortunately, Newegg didn't discover that cross-site scripting issue, and then ultimately had to inform their customers about all of these problems associated with the credit card numbers. That's definitely an issue. Now, would a DLP have stopped this? Probably not. DLP is designed to stop known types of data structures that you're very concerned about from going through the network. So something like a social security number has a very known structure, and it's a set of numbers that, in fact, not every number, not every combination of numbers together is a social security number. There's certain groups of social security numbers that were never given out, but there's certainly a large grouping of numbers that are social security numbers. The same thing applies for credit card numbers. If they wanted to block credit card numbers from going through that connection, they could have done that with a DLP. But that's the opposite of what they were trying to do. They wanted you to put your credit card number in, and so they didn't want to filter out credit card numbers. A DLP in that case would be bad if you filtered on credit card numbers, because you wouldn't be able to buy anything if you didn't put your credit card number in. This is the problem. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, but that would have been ingress versus egress filtering, though.
That's true.
I mean,
that's true.
Couldn't you set the?
Good point.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you set the DLP for egress filtering on that, couldn't it have caught it?
So you're saying after the fact,
that appliance. Put the appliance between the website and the internet connection.
Right, absolutely. And that's the place where it would have helped, is not on the initial purchase of the product, but if some way they were able to stop the exfiltration of the data. That's the technical security term of, once the bad guys have collected your data, now how do they get it back? How do they exfiltrate that information from the Newegg site to their servers? And of course, this is where a lot of companies are focusing then, because they know there's going to be a link down to their site. Well, why don't you just block everything else? Why don't you blacklist everything? That way, if they try to FTP it, they're not going to do it. If they try to send encrypted data, we're going to decrypt it as it goes through the network, look inside of it, see if there's credit card numbers, and block it there. In fact, that might have been their warning sign that suddenly something weird is going on and we needed to block this. Maybe they weren't even able, maybe it was being encrypted through a way that couldn't be decrypted, but they have a firewall smart enough to see that encrypted data that they're not able to see is trying to be exfiltrated. Let's filter it out immediately and not allow it out. So yeah, that would absolutely be a good place.
Yeah, from what I understand also, sometimes in order to speed up particular web servers, the decryption process is offloaded prior to getting there, and because it would make them work faster as far as the payment, and so it would be decrypted before it actually even hit that web server.
This is one of the challenges that we never see on our side as consumers, is that we may be encrypting up to the load balancer at that third party, but between the load balancer and the web server could still all be in the clear, but we would never know. We don't have a way to see that on our side of the connection. We just have to hope that the security professionals at that company are encrypting from end to end, or have put in the proper security in that section where data is not encrypted, that it's in the clear, so that things like this could not happen. I don't think that anybody dealing with credit card numbers, though, is allowed to have an in the clear connection based on the PCI DSS requirements. That doesn't mean they don't. That would mean they're out of spec, though, as far as the requirements are concerned.
But even if all that hardware was located in the secure area where no one had access to, I mean, couldn't it be transferred in the clear within, a few feet?
It would certainly be a case where you would be concerned about somebody walking into the data center, plugging into a jack, capturing the information going by, and now having a packet capture that's full of in the clear, non-encrypted credit card numbers. That would be an awfully large breach of security. I can't imagine anybody doing that with credit card numbers these days. But of course, every time I say that, as someone who worked as a next generation firewall engineer, every time I said certainly nobody's doing that, we would run into somebody who was doing something like that. So you never know what you happen to find in those environments. That's why when you come to my site, if you were to buy something on my site, first off, everything on my site is end-to-end encryption. I don't have anything in the clear no matter what page you go to. And secondly, when you buy something from my site, you never transmit credit card numbers to me. I pull up the page from PayPal or from Stripe, which are the credit card transaction companies I use, and you're sending the information directly to them, and they have some of the most stringent security requirements for credit card numbers. I never see your number. I don't want to see your number. I don't want that responsibility. And if something bad happens and somebody does gain access to data that's on my side, they're never going to get your financial information, which is exactly the way I designed it.
I guess the bottom line in all this is, which is kind of concerning to me, is that, we were always taught that if you were on a website that had HTTPS, that your payment information was secure. And now this kind of, shows that that's not necessarily the case.
That absolutely shows that that is not necessarily the case. And, we at least try to get people looking at the encryption piece. We're so far beyond that now. Now that we encrypt everything, the bad guy said, well, that's difficult. Now what are we going to do? And they simply go to the next step. This is a game. It's a race. It's a process of layers to figure out, once we close one door, how can we find another open door? It's a constant process. And once we close this door, once we figure out how to prevent cross-site scripting, they're going to find another way to do it. So we're just waiting for the next thing to happen. And that's why, and I mention this a lot, that's why security professionals, it's a fantastic type of world to live in, because it's constantly changing. It's a challenging job. And it's one that if you're doing it right, you're trying to layer on and check against many different things happening all at the same time. It's not an easy process.
So basically what I did is I just went to my bank and I said I lost my card, and they're going to reissue another card. And that way all the data that was captured from me is going to be, not useful for the bad guy.
This is one of those problems we have. And it's interesting the way you handled it, because these big breaches are sometimes hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of credit cards that become breached, that become available to bad guys. But that doesn't mean people are using those cards. The credit card companies, especially on these huge breaches, they don't automatically cancel and send you a new card. It almost never happens that they would do that, because their perspective is it's going to cost a lot of time and money to manufacture new cards and get them to you. It's going to be much easier just to wait for the problems to occur. They'll look for certain things to happen with your card. Your card's being used in China. Your card's being used to buy things you don't normally buy. They put a lot of different algorithms in place. That's their focus. You kind of got around all of that. You're not waiting for them to send a new card. Even if you called them and said, I'm definitely one of the people associated with this hack at Newegg, their response could possibly be, yeah, but your card's not being compromised. We've not seen evidence of your card being compromised. We're not necessarily going to send you a new card. However, if you lose your card, well, we got to send you a new card. So that was well played.
Right. And that's exactly why I went that route, because I was afraid that they were going to do exactly what you just said.
That is one of those cases where they have to send you a card. At least at that point, they've locked things down, and you kind of have to tell them, make sure you lock that other card up, because you might have all kinds of recurring transactions and other things that use that card. You're going to have to go back and now replace that. It's not a simple process, but it is one that is very effective.
Well, hey, it was great talking to you again, Professor Messer.
Thanks,
have a great day.
I appreciate the call. That's one whenever you start looking at all of the breaches that occur, all the possible problems that you can run into. I think over the last years, there may be 10 or 12 different incidents where I know my card was breached. The Target breach, the Home Depot breach. There were breaches with health insurance companies I used to be with. There were breaches from employers that I used to work for. All of these things my financial information was associated with. It's just out there. Multiple versions of it. And in fact, I did get a call from one of my card companies, and they said, we're sending you a new card. It'll be there tomorrow. Your card doesn't work anymore. Like, wow, something must have really gone bad for them to want to do that. So that's one where there's an enormous issue associated. So look out for those things too, and being able to find those. Let's have a look at phone calls. The 313 area code's been holding for so long. Thank you for holding, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Did you hear the beep? You might be
Hello?
on mute. There. Hey, there he is. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is B. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing so well, sir. How about yourself? Well, what can we do for you today?
Yeah, I just wanted to find out more light about cybersecurity and all that.
Okay.
Are you really saying if somebody wants to put his foot in the door,
Yep.
cybersecurity, is it really in a great demand? Is it easy to break into?
This is probably one of the most popular questions that come on the site, which is getting into security. I just gave you an example, for instance, of where IT security professionals work so hard to protect networks, but where do you get the information you need to be able to get into those roles? This has come up before on the study groups, and I'll tell you what I saw, because I would visit over in that position I had as a systems engineer for next generation firewall company. I would go around to many different companies, and I would visit them and talk to their security people. And what I found is that in all of these organizations I was going to, almost everybody I was talking to was someone who came through the ranks through the networking side. And that's because IT security has such an incredibly strong foundation that's required in networking. And it's not something people inherently think about. When people see IT security on the internet, it's all about the red team and the blue team and the pen testing and attacking different systems and vulnerabilities and hacking into machines. As it turns out, IT security is a very small amount of that has anything to do with intrusions. A huge chunk of IT security is about implementing these solutions in your environment and protecting your existing networks and data. So it's implementing firewalls, connecting firewall into your existing routing and switching infrastructure, being able to have redundant firewalls, being able to connect IPsec tunnels to other organizations and other sites that are connected to your network. You know, all of those things have such a huge foundation in networking. You would not be able to engineer any of those. You would not be able to implement any of those technologies on your network unless you already understood IP routing, IP networking, understanding the way things work at a switch level, understanding switch technologies, understanding routing algorithms, understanding how data is going to flow through the network. That's the important part. So whenever somebody says, how do I get my foot in the door with security? There's not a lot of entry-level security jobs. To get your foot into the door, you need to have this strong networking background and then be able to layer the security piece on top of that. But you can't get anywhere until you've got that networking side. That's why I often tell people, go get those networking certifications. Go get as much knowledge as you can in switch administration, router administration, firewall administration. Anything connected to the network is going to help you when you're ready to go into security.
So you suggest Network Plus might be the best certification to start with, right?
Network Plus is a great place to start. It gives you that at least a beginning of a foundation in networking. I often tell people, obviously Cisco is the big player in switching and routing, but one of the advantages that I found by going into and getting Cisco certifications is that Cisco not only teaches you how to administer a Cisco switch and how to administer a Cisco router, but they also teach you, here's how switches work. Here's how spanning tree works. Here's how switch port security works. Here's how routing protocols work. And then you can apply those to Cisco products. But you could also apply all of those to other products as well. Spanning tree on a Cisco switch works the same as spanning tree on every other switch you'll run into. So once you understand the underlying technology, implementing that on a switch or a router becomes relatively easy to do, because now all you have to do is know the little minuscule differences between Cisco and other technologies. That's really the easy part. Engineering it is the more difficult part. So yeah, start with Network Plus, maybe get Cisco's CCNA routing and switching, and then from there, get as much hands-on with networking as you can that you can then later on apply into security.
Okay. Do I need a knowledge of, even if I want to go to security, fully later, along the line, they have to have a knowledge of programming.
From a IT perspective, there is almost no programming involved in IT. So let me first explain what I mean by that, because some people hear programming and they think that anytime you're doing any type of scripting that you're programming. I don't call that programming. I know there's a difference in nomenclature. I consider programming to be people that are doing coding, that are people on the computer science side. They're building applications in C, in Java, in object-oriented programming languages. They're understanding the nuances of programming. You could spend years understanding how to properly develop, structure, and program in a single programming language. That's a completely different world from IT. As an IT professional who came up the ranks working with operating systems, networks, and security, I did zero programming, and you will do zero programming as well. Did I do automation and scripting? I did a ton of it. So if you're somebody who wants to automate things, who needs to write scripts, who needs to understand how to make things work more efficiently in their environments, you absolutely need to understand some basic scripting. So make sure that you understand and become familiar with Perl, with Python, with your basic shell scripting, with PowerShell. All of those will help you be able to automate and orchestrate the way that your networking and security environment operates. That's not programming, but it is an incredibly good skill to have.
Okay. Then one more question. Do you know anything about about the CISA certification, the IT auditing side? Is it in demand?
Which certification?
CISC for IT auditors.
The audit. I've had a number of people ask about the auditing certifications. I haven't had a lot of employers looking for them. I think it's a very specialized certification, and for people that are doing security auditing, it probably is a requirement. But I think that's one of those that you get to after you get your foot in the door with security. Then you start finding specific niches to move into. Maybe you do more with SIMs. Maybe you do more with firewalls and IPS. Maybe you do more with auditing. I think that one comes later.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling. That's when you'll find security has some very broad certifications associated with it, but most certifications are focused on a basic security. You probably, once you do security, is you go into those specific niches. So you become very familiar on a security environment with the broad CISSP or Cisco security, CCNA security certification. And then at that point, you start looking at individual manufacturers' certifications, maybe getting something specific to a SIM, maybe getting certified on a firewall, maybe getting certified on a type of intrusion prevention product or DLP. Those kind of drill down, or auditing. Those you probably drill down later on and work through. Yeah, for people in the chat room asking about the CEU, that was in the first hour. You're welcome to go back. Once we're done here, the replay will be available immediately. Sometime during that first hour, I provided information on CEUs. You can learn more about that. Yep, people talking in the chat room also about the scripting part. The scripting is one where is incredibly important. It also gives you the ability to interact at a higher level or even a more detailed level with other products. Let me give an example. There's a number of firewalls out there that will provide an API, an application programming interface. If you've ever done any work with firewalls, you know that you're either connecting into a browser-based front end or you're going in through a command line. But occasionally you want to automate that process. Maybe when you're not there, maybe you have to do this across 100 firewalls. Maybe you just want to pull specific kinds of information back and being able to manipulate or use the firewall in different ways that are not at a command line and not through the browser front end. And that application programming interface is another way to do that. But to be able to take advantage of that API, you have to write some type of script. And that script may be a Perl script. Maybe they have a Perl library you can use. That way you don't have to talk the language of the firewall. You talk the language of the middleman, which is the API. And you ask the API, could you please go to the firewall and get for me the list of users that have been blocked in the last 24 hours? The API knows how to talk to the firewall and do that, and then it presents you with that list. So it gives you a much easier front end to be able to automate some of that process. I think it helps a lot if you can use some type of scripting language, whether it's something that's based on something very knowledgeable, very well used, or something you know very well, because you can use a number of these techniques between PowerShell and Perl. There's a lot of similarities in the thought and logic process going through that. So make sure that if you're going down that road, that you try to find something very popular and go with it, and I think you'll be fine. Should you know, in the chat room, people ask, should you know Linux for security? I think you should know every operating system if you plan on getting into any type of security role. Microsoft is a huge operating system that's in use everywhere you go. You should understand the makeup, the administration, and of course the security aspects of that operating system, because the way that Microsoft Windows uses and implements security in the operating system, very different than the way Linux implements security in the operating system, and in fact very different than the way Mac OS implements security. So I would highly recommend, if you've not done a lot with Linux and you're planning to get into security, definitely get as much knowledge as you can on Linux, get as much knowledge as you can on Mac OS, get as much knowledge as you can on Microsoft Windows. All of those are going to help you as you get into security, because they all work a little bit differently. And yet there's still a lot of those operating systems that operate identically on the network. So you need to know what things are the same and what things are different between those operating systems. It will help you quite a bit as you step through there. Will I ever release guides for Cisco certifications? I already have. On my website is an ICND1 Cisco certification guide. So if you're working towards your ICND1, I have a set of course notes available for the ICND1. And I'd love to get some done for the ICND2. It's about really finding time to do that. It's all a physics problem at this point, and being able to make that happen. That's where I really try to sort of broaden my efforts. There should be a lot more of these course notes available. People seem to like them, so that's helpful. Do the CEU credits expire? They don't, but there may be a requirement from who you're submitting the CEUs to as to when you get them. For example, if you don't have your Security Plus certification, you can't earn a CEU to renew the Security Plus certification until you've earned the certification. Some people also use these CEUs for other things as well. So it may not be something you're even using through Microsoft. You may be using the CEUs for Cisco. Your employer may be asking for these CEUs. You may be using them for a different certification. That's all on who you're giving the CEUs to. So the question, can you collect them and use them? That's up to who you're ultimately giving them to. I'll hand them out. Can you use them? I don't know. You may be able to, or you might not. You just never know. You need to figure out who you're giving it to and ask them, and they'll be able to tell you. At least CompTIA tells you, yeah, we won't take them. If you earn your certification tomorrow, you won't be able to use a CEU you earned today. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? So that'd be the one. And good, a lot of people in the chat room giving recommendations on Linux distributions, Kali Linux, Ubuntu. Any Linux is going to give you at least some knowledge of the operating system. And I highly recommend, if you're getting into Linux, you have a look at Linux Plus. There's a current Linux Plus certification. They're in a migration. There is a new Linux Plus that's coming. You may want to look at what that new Linux Plus is going to bring to the table. I think CompTIA is bringing it in-house. I think they're simplifying it a bit. I haven't seen the details yet, but a lot of Linux is at the operating system command line level. Some of Linux deals with the graphical user interface, but absolutely you should think about how you're going to be using Linux. And at the command line is how most people would prefer you do it. I think a big emphasis of Linux Plus is currently command line based, and I think that's a good place to be. Were there CEUs from the past month sent? There were. And if you did not receive an email, you may want to send that CEU in again. Make sure you follow the CEU format and the instructions that I gave, because if you don't do that, you won't receive a CEU. But everything has been sent out. I've got a few in there over the last week. I think I sent some about a week ago, and I was up to date as of last week. So if you haven't got one in the last week, then definitely resend that in. I'll be glad to send it back and have those things there. What distribution of Linux does CompTIA use for Linux Plus? They will use a mixture of different distributions, but they focus on the two major different sides of distributions. Fortunately, even though there are, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of different Linux variations, there are really 3 or 4 different families that are really popular and in use. And fortunately, a lot of the functionality between those families of Linux is the same. There are some significant differences between certain families. So if you grab 2 of those big families and you focus on those, I think you're fine. Most books will tell you which 2 to go with. They'll tell you to go with a Red Hat flavor and with one that's running something else. Those are usually your 2 best bets. I think on mine, I think I was showing in some of my earlier Linux videos, and I haven't done any Linux videos since then, but I think I grabbed a Red Hat or maybe a CentOS, and I grabbed a SUSE. So those were the 2 I used. So one of those would be very useful to have. And I think if you just have one, it's going to take you very far. And you can kind of extrapolate from there. Maybe the process of installing and updating programs on one is different than the process of installing and updating on the other. And therein lies kind of the problem with Linux, is that the fragmentation provides as much flexibility as you need, but unfortunately it also adds complexity. And that's one of the issues that a lot of people have with Linux, is you find the one you really know and you kind of stick with that one. That's why I think Red Hat has done so well. I think that's why Red Hat was purchased by IBM, because they really built this nice foundation of a user base that has become very comfortable with that distribution. And you can't use everything in Red Hat and move off to another different family of distributions and be as useful with that one. So you tend to stay with that family of Linux that you know the best. So I think that's an easy way to do it. You know, the best way to do this, as people are saying in the chat room, is download a virtual machine or install it onto a new VM using a free VM system like VirtualBox, or using another virtual system that is available. May not be free, but there's plenty of others out there, many from VMware and elsewhere, that you can use to install it as a VM on your computer, and then you can do whatever you want in Linux, and you're not going to break anything, which is extremely useful if you're someone like me who breaks a lot of things. I spend a lot of time running and testing on separate platforms, on separate virtual machines, on separate systems, and then I'm comfortable doing other things with it. So whenever you see an update to my website, well, you usually don't see the updates to my website because they're done after a ton of testing that I've done elsewhere on a separate virtual machine. So, and people said that's a great way to do it. Although people also saying in the chat room, well, I tried installing in a VM and it crashed. Yeah, there you go. That sounds like Linux. Sounds like it. But usually those are inconsistencies or incompatibilities between the virtual environment and the version of Linux you're installing. And fortunately, the Linux communities online will usually talk about installing certain versions onto certain versions. So you can at least see this version of Linux works fine on this version of VirtualBox, and you can run it from there. And that might help as well. You never know about these weird issues that show up, especially in things like VirtualBox. It might work badly on VirtualBox and fine on VMware's product, or vice versa. Just never know what you're going to run into. So you have to be flexible with Linux. You never know what it's remarkable it works at all. As I constantly say, it's amazing any of this works at all. What areas of security are highly demanded? All of the areas of security are highly demanded. It's a market out there that's available and ready for people. And what most employers are doing is getting you in security, and then you will begin to focus on different areas and focus through all of those pieces. IT security tends to be the largest scope of security. That's the one, as I mentioned, that people don't talk about. It's not sexy. There's not a ton of penetration testing. It's not the red team, blue team. They don't have that stuff going on. That's not anywhere close to what mainstream IT security is all based on. So if you just focus on that big chunk of IT security, that is the daily monitoring and maintenance and installation and engineering of firewalls and intrusion prevention and SSL VPNs and IPsec VPNs and multi-factor authentication methods and setting policies and tracking and reporting and alerting and alarming. That's what people do all day. That's IT security. There's not really a lot of penetration testing in there. Maybe you're doing some Nmap scans. Maybe you got at least an Nmap automated process that's checking the core of the network. That's what people are doing. Now, obviously, there are certainly jobs out there for penetration testing. There's certainly jobs out there for hunting down malware and breaking it apart and understanding how it works. Those are very, very niche. They are nowhere even close to being mainstream in IT security. So that's why I mentioned get networking, understand the details of the network, layer the security on top of it, and you're going to have the best possible chance for getting those security jobs. So definitely think about doing that. What would I suggest is a good strategy for finding what jobs include those qualities that I just mentioned? That is the process of, as I mentioned in other study groups, is a multi-step process. It's a multi-factor process. Speaking of multi-factor, it is one where you can't just rely on you sitting in a dark room, surfing through the different websites to find security jobs and putting your resume in and then hoping for the best. That is not a high percentage way to go about getting these jobs. This is one where you need to go meet people. You need to go do people networking. You need to go to your local ISSA meeting. You need to go to your local Cisco user group meeting. You need to go to your local Microsoft user group meeting. You need to meet the people in these companies that are doing this today, or at least they know of the people in your company that are doing this. And you can ask them questions about, what are you looking for? You can tell people straight up, I'm here at the Microsoft user group meeting. Your group handles server administration at your company. I'm interested in getting into server administration, network administration, security administration, whatever it happens to be. And you can ask them, what does your company look for in those people? And they may say, well, we don't look for any certifications, but we look for this experience. Or they may say, experience isn't that important, but we look for these certifications. Or they say, we have a lot of open recs. We'll take whoever we can get and we'll train you on what you need to know. The philosophies are different no matter where you go, but you have to find those things out. Meet the people that are doing this. Keep a conversation with them. Add them to LinkedIn. Send them your resume if they ask for it, or say, can I send you my resume? You can submit it to HR. A lot of the times people don't know that the people in these companies get money. They get a bonus if you get hired. If they bring someone in from the outside, they will give their employee a bonus of whoever brought their resume in. So these people in these companies want your resume often so that they can get money from that. It's a lot less expensive for a company to give an employee a bonus than it is to give a recruiter a percentage of your first year's salary, which is generally how recruiters are paid. So it's much less expensive if somebody else internally, plus they already know who you are. Companies are much more apt to hire people if they know who you are and that you know people in their organization, because there's a connection there. Oh, you're not some stranger from off the street. Oh, you know Fred from the user group meeting. Oh, you've known him for 6 months from the user group meeting. That's great. What have you guys learned at the user group meeting? What'd you do? Those are very, very valuable connections to have. And I've mentioned on other user groups, and I'll mention again, through my career, I've had, 12 different job titles. Sometimes it was moving within the same organization. Sometimes it was moving to completely different companies, but somewhere around 10 to 12 different jobs in my IT career. I think that's probably conservative, but we'll say that's the number. The first job I got was working for a computer company in South Miami. That computer company, they didn't know me from anybody. It was sort of a fluke that I got the job. To this day, I don't know why they hired me, but they did. They hired some kid out of college who had some knowledge of computers and understood how to take a computer apart and put cards in and identify when memory was bad and upgrade hard drives and that type of thing. And that was the first job I got in the industry. Every other job I got after that, I knew somebody who worked there. I either met them on the job I currently had, I met them at a user group meeting, I met them at a trade show, I met them by people that you run into in your same organization who then leaves. Sometimes you run into people when you're in for an interview. You go by your desk, go, oh, Jose, I didn't know you worked here now. Oh, me and Jose go way back. We go back to our job at blah, blah, blah in South Miami and the thing that we did. Those are incredibly important connections. Make sure you take advantage of those, and being able to have that there becomes incredibly useful. And every other job I got after that, I knew somebody who already worked there. This was the only job I ever had after that point, I guess, where I didn't know anybody, but I made this job. So I'm the only one here in this room. So I didn't have to get hired. I was the one who hired myself. So technically I did know somebody who worked here for this, and having that there. Open source. Is open source like an operating system like Linux better of a chance of somebody hacking into it or getting malware on it? Who knows? Who knows? That question itself is can go many different ways. Because a bad application, an application as a security vulnerability is an application as a security vulnerability. And I won't say most, but many applications out there have a security vulnerability inside of them. We just haven't found it yet. So the bad guys are going to focus on the low-hanging fruit. They're going to focus on the platforms that are used the most. And Linux has had some doozies of security vulnerabilities. Microsoft Windows has had some doozies of security vulnerabilities. Mac OS has had some doozies of security vulnerabilities. Every operating system is susceptible to these security problems. The question is, are the bad guys going to spend the time finding those vulnerabilities and taking advantage of them? And they're usually going to go the places that's going to earn them the biggest return for their investment. So Microsoft Windows tends to be a very well-researched operating system, and they keep finding vulnerabilities because of that. It's also a well-used operating system. Linux has the same problem. Open source really has nothing to do with it. It's hard to write secure code. And whether that's in an open source environment like Linux or whether it's in a closed source environment like Windows, it's hard to write secure code. So I guess you could make the argument that because Linux is open source and you have the ability to read through the actual source code, that somehow makes it more secure. Unfortunately, in practice, that doesn't really seem to be the case because I'd have to be able to read code to be able to do that. And the people reading the code are the developers, and they're the ones that wrote the bad code to start with. So it's theoretically, Linux should be more secure. Practically speaking, I haven't actually seen that. Maybe there's somebody's actually done some scientific work breaking down, giving real numbers. But just from what we've seen, Linux is just as open as anything else. That's going to make somebody angry, I'm sure. So that's kind of how it goes. Let's go to the phones real quick. 302 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Oh, I got to turn your name up there. Hi, caller. Where are you calling from?
Yes. My name is Thomas.
Hey, Thomas. What can we do for you today?
Yeah, I'm trying to, I have the opportunity to attend. Is this Professor's Master's Class studio?
Oh, yeah. You're live, sir. So you may want to turn that stream off and talk directly through the phone. What question do you have today?
Okay. Okay, yes, sir. I have the opportunity to attend a free class. I'm working on my security flows right now. I should be doing the exam in the few weeks to come. but I also have an opportunity to attend a free IT classes from one of the college close to my area here. They are going to offer Oracle, CCNA Security, CCNA, Java, SQL, and CCNP. I was just wondering, what do you think is going to be appropriate, with this Security Plus background that I have?
Nice. That's a fantastic opportunity. So good for you for taking advantage of that. Secondly, the question about that's a very broad list of different things that you just named. Anything dealing with networking is going to be incredibly important. Anything dealing with Cisco technologies, a Cisco certification will certainly have a lot of value associated with security. Things dealing with Oracle, maybe not so much, not as much. Things relating to individual operating systems, not as much. The more networking you can get and the more direct security related to maybe the Cisco CCNA Security, I think you may have mentioned, those are spot on. Those would be great classes to go to.
Thank you very much. I was thinking of that in that direction too, but I just needed, your guidance to be able to know I'm really taking the right decision. That's
fantastic that you're able to get those for no or minimal cost. Absolutely take advantage of that. Plus, you're going to meet some great people in that class.
Yes, I believe.
Fantastic. Best of luck, Thomas.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, there he goes. So thanks. That's a great opportunity there. People would kill for that, to have those things there. A lot of companies will also do free training. So they'll send you off to training. The only thing I really tell people be very careful about are anything that says boot camp. Security Plus is an incredibly broad and extensive set of training objectives. Boot camps are a way that people try to cram an entire set of things you need to know for Security Plus into 1 or sometimes 2 weeks, but usually it's a 1 week thing. There's no possible way you can go from zero to everything you need to know in 1 week of training classes. It is physically impossible. Talking of laws of physics, you can't do it. It won't work. You will not have the best possible environment. And unfortunately, people go into these courses, which are incredibly expensive, many thousands of dollars to take a 1 week Security Plus boot camp. An awful idea to start from zero. The only place where I could see those courses having any type of applicability would be if you already were 80% of the way. You already had a huge amount of knowledge and security, and you just wanted that final validation. That's a very expensive 20% of validation to have that. And even then, you're having to repeat information you already know. It's not even that efficient for you to be there in that class. These are usually classes they have to do 12 hours a day. They send you home with homework. It's a miserable way to learn. It is an awful way to learn. I have never found a boot camp that I looked at in its description and method that made any sense to me. And by saying I've never seen it, I have never seen a good boot camp. The only thing where boot camp is incredibly useful is for the companies that are charging the thousands of dollars for you to be there. Those are the only ones getting something out of it, quite honestly. And if somebody has a boot camp and you take offense to that, it's too bad. That's just the way it's true. That's exactly the case. Do not take a boot camp. Waste of your time. Huge. Whether you know or whether you don't know, it's a waste of your time. Don't do that. The idea of going to a community college or a school, like a public school, like a public university, and taking a semester for Security Plus, there you go. That's the way you do it. You're meeting people. You've got plenty of time to learn these. You got plenty of time for hands-on. You got it's a proper learning environment. That's a great way to do it. And of course, self-study. A lot of people self-study for Security Plus. And of course, we have chat rooms and other places on our website that people come for security plus training as well. So find the way that works for you. Get a good book, watch some videos, get plenty of Q&A, get plenty of hands-on. Those 4 things. However you do that, if it's in a structured classroom, if it's by yourself, if it's online, get a good book, watch some good videos, do plenty of Q&A, get plenty of hands-on. Those are your 4 things. Do those 4 things, you've got what you need. Now it's up to you. Now you're the one who has to apply all of that. So make sure you think about those things and go through it. Another question in the chat room. We have some time left. I have my master's and some certifications. Okay, some good practical formal education and certifications. That's good. Your issue is experience in the field. The natural catch-22. People want to hire professionals who have experience, but you can't get experience unless you get hired. Why are they doing this? Why is that a problem? How is it that employers want so many years of experience for entry level? They may or they may not. They put that on the exam on the job description so that they kind of filter out people. But what I have found, and this is certainly not 100% of the time, but a good chunk of the time, what people put on job descriptions is not necessarily what they are hiring. Because putting these things down that are very broad, like I want you to have 10 years of security experience for this help desk position, well, you're not going to get that. So sometimes you have to read into what are they really looking for. For government jobs, you're right. A big challenge is they want some type of clearance for these jobs. All right, that's a different world unto itself. And sometimes you can go to work for a value-added reseller or some type of contractor with the U.S. government, and they know the people they're hiring for entry level aren't going to have these clearances, and they'll work towards getting these clearances. And then once you have the clearance, you have it, and you can continue to work for that company and you work for someone else. The barriers, the way you get around these barriers is, again, meet these people. You have to get into the middle of these communities. And what you'll find is wherever you happen to be, if you are in a particular geographical area, you will run into the same people all the time. You never want to burn any bridges. I got to tell you, you'll run into these people 10 years later and they go, oh yeah, I remember you. You're not getting a job here. Or they will say, yeah, I remember you. You're definitely getting a job here. That's what you want to think about, is finding out who these people are. ISSA user group meeting, Cisco user group meeting, Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, Checkpoint user group meeting. Go to all these user groups, meet these people. Trade shows. There's lots of local IT trade shows you may not even know about, but there's plenty of them. Just search around in your area for IT trade shows, especially regional IT trade shows. Plenty of people to meet. People who are speaking at these IT trade shows are people who are local in your area in many cases. You can meet them. Introduce yourself. Hi, my name is. I am. I'm trying to get a job in this industry. I just got my degree in blah, blah. I've got a master's and I've got some certifications. What do I need to work for you guys? I like what your company is doing. What do I need to do to get in the door with you? What do you recommend I do? That's all you have to do. That's the only thing you have to ask. They will tell you. Oh, well, you need to call this person. You need to talk to this person. You need to have this knowledge. You need to have this knowledge. And sometimes getting the practical experience may be as easy as volunteering. It might be as easy as setting up your own lab and running your own content through it. Those types of things, they count when you're in an interview. Well, the interviewer say, well, what type of experience do you have with firewalls? Well, I have not worked at a company with enterprise firewall, but I set up my own enterprise firewall at home. Here's the way I did it. Here's what I found. And here's what I was able to block that I didn't know was coming into my environment. And here's our report I created based on that information directly from the firewall software. And here's a copy of it. They go, oh, you created this report? Oh, that's impressive. That's the thing that employers are looking for, is that level of interest, that level of initiative, and that level of knowledge. So be able to be ready for anything. If you aren't doing something in your security lab now, you're not spending the right amount of time on security. You should have something set up at home. Run a virtual machine. Load up Linux. Load up pfSense. Load up Snort. Load up and load up a old Windows configuration and attack it with Metasploit, and watch yourself get a prompt, an administrator prompt on that machine, and then delete the entire system. And you can tell people, here's what I did last week. I loaded up Windows 10. I attacked it with this specific exploit. I got a command prompt, and then I nuked the whole system on my internal network and showed that it could be done. And then I set up Windows again, and I protected against it. I loaded the patch, and then I tried it again. It didn't work, and here's what I did. Those are great things. That is a very practical piece. So that's one of the things you have to really consider when going into what you're doing. I think that's pretty important, that you have something that you could tell of a story, because that's what people are looking for. Tell us you have some practical knowledge of this content. You never know who the other people are coming in to interview. They may be getting people with the same experience that you have, but at the end of the week, they got to pick somebody. But if they pick the one that had the lab and you did all of these things, that puts you in a higher up the list. And that becomes pretty important to have those there. Makes sense to me. So Mike in the chat room is talking about a boot camp, a 3-day Security Plus boot camp. Now, fortunately, your example is you'd taken the 401 twice before. It was 2 10 to 12 hour days, half day, and then lunch and then the exam. Does that sound conducive to learning to anyone? You were lucky you at least had that 401 stuff in your back pocket, so good for you. And you passed. The good part, you passed. So I shouldn't say it doesn't work for everybody. At least something about that worked for you. That just doesn't sound like a very fun way to study in my mind. Sounds like an awful way to study in my mind to get those things there. So you never know what you're going to find. Well, that brings us to the end of another hour. Tomorrow in the United States is Thanksgiving. It is a time to sit back with family, reflect over the previous year, and to say what we're thankful for. And I have to tell you, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for your support of the site. I'm thankful for the folks in the chat room, the people who call in every month, the people that tell me the clock is wrong on my site, that I can fix it, the people that keep this whole thing running. People that send me emails and say I passed my exam. These types of things go much farther than you could ever imagine. My entire family is grateful for you. We are thankful for you every day. We appreciate everything that you do for us, not only on Thanksgiving, but throughout the entire year. Thank you for being here. Hope to see you here next month. Check with us on the calendar. We'd love to have you back here again. Thanks for being here. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group.